You're standing in your garden at sunrise, coffee in hand, and there they are. Again, holes chewed through your cabbage, aphids packed thick on the underside of your tomato plants, squash bugs marching across the zucchini like they own the place. And you've already sprayed 3 times this month. What if I told you that 2 of the cheapest metals on Earth, metals you can hold in your palm for under $20 total, will end every crawling, flying, chewing pest problem you have, permanently? No spraying, no reapplying, no rotating chemicals because the bugs built resistance again. The Amish in Lancaster County have been using this exact method since the 1860s. It's the reason their gardens look like paintings, while the rest of us are losing half our harvest to pests we can't even name. And stay with me until the end, because there is a document I found buried in the Penn State Agricultural Archives from 1923, a field report from a farm outside Intercourse, Pennsylvania, that explains exactly why this technique vanished from every gardening book printed after World War II. Once you see it, you'll understand why your grandparents never had the pest problems you have now. Let me tell you about the moment I became a believer. An Amish grandfather named Eli, in his 70s, walked me out to his potato patch. Now, if you've ever grown potatoes, you know the Colorado potato beetle, those striped monsters that can strip a plant to bare stems in 48 hours. Eli's potatoes were flawless. Not a single beetle, not a single chewed leaf. I watched him the whole time. He never sprayed a thing. Not neem oil, not diatomaceous earth, nothing from a bottle. What he did was push thin strips of copper into the soil around the base of each plant. Narrow bands, maybe 2 inches wide, buried about 1 inch deep so only the top edge showed above the soil. That was it. That was his entire pest control system. Here's why it works. Most crawling insects carry a slight electrical charge in their bodies. When they touch a copper-soil interface, it creates a tiny galvanic reaction, like a mild electric shock. Slugs get it worst. The reaction with their slime is almost instant. But beetles, cutworms, earwigs, pillbugs, ants farming aphids, they all avoid it. Cornell University confirmed this in a 1994 study on copper barriers for slug control. The result? 96% reduction. Not 40, not 60, 96%. And the copper doesn't wear out, doesn't wash away, doesn't need reapplication. Eli told me the copper strips around his potatoes had been in that exact ground for 19 years. 19 years of pest control for the cost of a single pack of strips. But copper alone is only half the system, because copper handles the crawlers. It does nothing for what flies in from above. That's where the second metal comes in. And this is where it gets strange. The Amish have been using zinc alongside copper for over 150 years. In Holmes County, Ohio, the old German-speaking farmers called it the Spanningsfeld, a tension field. When zinc and copper are both present in moist soil, they form a weak bioelectric circuit. The soil itself becomes the electrolyte. You're essentially building a low-voltage battery underneath your garden. The current is far too weak for you to feel, but it's strong enough to repel soft-bodied insects and disrupt the egg-laying behavior of flying pests like cabbage moths and squash vine borers. Auburn University ran a soil conductivity study in 2008 and measured exactly this phenomenon. Beds with dual metal placement had 37% higher microbial activity and dramatically lower pest pressure than control beds. The researchers even admitted in their conclusion that something was happening in the root zone that traditional entomology didn't fully explain. The Amish don't need the explanation. Their great-grandfathers brought this technique from Switzerland and the Palatinate region of Germany in the 1700s. It was standard practice on every plain farm in Pennsylvania until roughly 1948, and then it vanished from the books. I'll tell you exactly why in a few minutes. Now I know what some of you are thinking. You've had the same garden beds for 20 years. You're not tearing anything up. You're not starting over. Perfect. Because you don't have to. Here's exactly what Eli told me to tell people with established gardens. What to buy. Copper flashing roll, 6 inches wide, 10 feet. Approximately $18 at any hardware store. Roofers use this box of galvanized roofing nails. Approximately $3 at any farm store. Total, under $25. How to install copper cut. the copper flashing into strips 2 inches wide and 8 inches long. Push them vertically into the soil around the perimeter of each bed, spaced about 12 inches apart, with just half an inch showing above the surface. You can retrofit an entire raised bed in under 10 minutes. You haven't dug anything up. You haven't disturbed a single root. Take your galvanized roofing nails and hammer them into your existing wooden stakes, tomato cages, or trellis posts. 4 or 5 nails per stake, driven deep so the heads sit flush with the wood. That's all. Here's what you'll notice. Week 1, not much, the system is charging. Week 2, slug damage drops to almost nothing. Week 4, aphid populations collapse because the ants that farm them stop crossing the copper. Week 6, cabbage moths begin laying eggs at your neighbor's garden instead of yours. End of season. You will genuinely wonder how you ever gardened without this. I had a neighbor in Ohio, a woman in her 60s who had been fighting squash bugs for 15 years. Try this in her existing garden. She called me 3 months later. I could hear her laughing on the phone. She said, "I have 0 squash bugs, 0, after 15 years. Then she said she felt cheated. Cheated by every magazine, every extension pamphlet, every overpriced bottle in the plumbing aisle. Now, let me tell you about that 1923 document, the one from the Penn State Agricultural Archives. In the 1920s, county extension agents surveyed Amish and Mennonite farms, trying to document what these communities were doing that kept their yields so consistently high, without any commercial inputs. One report, written by an agent named H.R. Shoemaker, describes a farm near Intercourse, Pennsylvania, where a farmer identified only as Brother Yoder had been using copper and zinc in his vegetable plots for 4 decades. The report noted 0 measurable pest damage on cabbage, potatoes, or cucurbits. Shoemaker recommended further study. That further study never happened. What happened instead was the chemical revolution. DDT hit the market in 1945. Organophosphate pesticides followed. The USDA shifted its entire extension education toward chemical pest control, because that's where the research funding was coming from. Copper and zinc barrier techniques, published in American farming manuals as late as 1938, simply stopped being mentioned. Not outlawed, not banned, just quietly dropped from every new publication, every new textbook, every new pamphlet. By 1960, an entire generation of American gardeners had never heard of it. The Amish kept doing what they had always done. They don't read mainstream gardening magazines. They pass techniques from father to son, grandmother to granddaughter, in exactly the form they were taught. While the rest of American agriculture spent 70 years chasing pesticide after pesticide, watching each one fail as insects evolve resistance, the Amish were getting clean harvests with 2 metals and a hammer. Here's the part that genuinely stunned me when I understood it. Copper and zinc don't just repel insects, they feed the soil. Both metals are essential micronutrients for plant health. Copper is critical for photosynthesis and lignin production, the material that makes plant cell walls strong enough to resist insect chewing in the first place. Zinc is essential for enzyme function and for auxin, the hormone that controls root growth. When these metals sit in moist soil, they very slowly release trace ionic amounts into the root zone. We're talking micrograms. Nothing toxic, nothing that builds up. But over a full growing season, your plants absorb exactly the trace minerals they need to build tougher cell walls and stronger roots. And here's the thing, a plant with high lignin content and a vigorous root system is chemically unattractive to most insects. Bugs can sense weak plants. That's why pests always swarm the sickliest tomato in your row. Strong plants emit different volatile organic compounds, and most pest species simply fly past them. So, the metals do 2 things simultaneously. They create a physical and electrical barrier that keeps pests out, and they slowly fortify the plants themselves, so any pest that does get through finds a plant it doesn't want to eat. Amish, a blacksmith in Holmes County, put it best. He said, "The English think pest control is about killing. We think it's about making the plant strong enough that the bug has no interest. The metals do both. That's why they last." A 2016 Ohio State study on low-input farming systems found that gardens using embedded copper and zinc had 22% higher lignin content in leafy greens and 41% fewer pest incidents over the season, and critically, the effect compounded year after year. The longer the metals stay in place, the better the results get. Compare that to pesticides, which get less effective every season as resistance builds. They put you on a treadmill that runs slightly uphill. The metals put you on a system that runs slightly downhill. Before I give you the archive technique I promised, I need to correct the one mistake almost everyone makes when they try this. Most people, if they've heard of copper at all, put it flat on top of the soil or wrap it around the base of a tree trunk. That does nothing. The copper must be in contact with moist soil at a depth of at least 1 inch, with only a small strip visible above the surface. The galvanic reaction that creates the repellent effect requires continuous contact with soil moisture. A dry copper strip sitting on top of mulch is just decoration. For the zinc, placement height matters as much as placement location. It needs to be above ground level, tacked into wood or fencing at least 6 inches above the soil, but no more than 3 feet. The traditional Pennsylvania Dutch rule, knee height. That's the zone where flying insects make their final landing approach, and where the electromagnetic disturbance from the zinc-copper circuit is strongest. Now, the technique from the Shoemaker report, the one I've never seen in a single modern gardening book. In that 1923 field report, there's one paragraph that describes something Brother Yoder did that went beyond simple copper strips and zinc nails. At each of the 4 corners of his main vegetable plot, he kept a small clay pot buried in the ground, with the rim flush to the soil surface. Inside each pot, he placed a single copper penny and a single galvanized roofing nail. The pot was filled to the top with collected rainwater and refilled whenever it evaporated. Shoemaker noted, almost in passing, that Yoder called this the heart of the garden, and that without it, the copper strips alone were only half as effective. I'll be straight with you. When I first read that, I nearly dismissed it. It sounded like folklore, an old farmer's superstition. But I tried it anyway at a small test plot behind the house I was staying in. 4 clay pots, 4 pennies from before 1982, 4 galvanized nails, rainwater only. The results that first season were measurably better than the plot I'd set up with only strips and nails. I needed to understand why. I found a retired agricultural chemist from Penn State, a man in his 80s who still remembered the pre-chemical copper-zinc literature, and he explained it. The 4 corner water pots create what's called a distributed ionic field. Rainwater, being slightly acidic, slowly dissolves trace copper and zinc ions. Capillary action pulls those ions outward through the soil in a circular pattern. With 4 pots at 4 corners, those circles overlap and create a consistent micronutrient gradient across the entire garden bed. Plants growing inside that gradient show measurable increases in systemic acquired resistance, the plant's own immune response to pests and disease. The same mechanism that makes plants resistant after a mild infection, but triggered instead by micronutrient sufficiency. This is not in any gardening book I have ever read, not on any homesteading website. It exists in exactly one place, a typewritten field report in a Pennsylvania archive that almost nobody has looked at in 100 years, and in the oral tradition of a few dozen Amish families who still practice it without knowing why it works. You can build the complete system this weekend. Here's everything you need. The shopping list. Copper flashing roll, 6 inches wide, 10 feet. Approximately $18. Hardware store, roofing section. Box of galvanized roofing nails, approximately $3. Farm or hardware store. 4 small terracotta clay pots, 4 inch, approximately $4. $1 each at most garden centers. 4 pre-1982 pennies, free. Check your change jar. Rainwater, free. Collect from a downspout. Total, under $25. Lasts decades. Step-by-step install. Cut copper flashing into 2 inches by 8 inches strips. Push strips vertically into soil around each bed, 12 inches apart, ½ inch above surface. Hammer 4 to 5 galvanized nails into each wooden stake or trellis post, flush with the wood at knee height. Bury 1 terracotta pot at each corner of your garden, rim flush to the soil surface. Drop 1 pre-1982 copper penny and 1 galvanized nail into each pot. Fill pots with rainwater. Refill whenever they evaporate. Total setup time, 30 to 45 minutes for a full raised bed system. Total durability, as long as the clay pots don't crack, essentially permanent. Here's what I want you to hear before you go. The reason your garden has struggled isn't because you're doing something wrong. It's because the knowledge that would make it easy was quietly set aside 3 generations ago. And the people who kept it alive don't advertise. If you're the kind of person who senses that something important has been missing from the advice we've all been given, that real, working, time-tested knowledge has been pushed to the margins so someone else could sell you a bottle every spring, then you already know what to do with what you just heard. You try it. You see for yourself. You become the neighbor who hands a copper strip to the next person complaining about slugs. Before you go, tell me this in the comments. What's the one pest that has driven you the most crazy over the last few years? Squash bugs? Cabbage moths? Colorado potato beetles? Something else entirely? I read every comment, and I want to know what you're dealing with. Because the next video goes deeper into specific pest problems and the specific Amish response for each one. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming. Because the 2 metals are just the first layer. There's an entire system of suppressed agricultural knowledge still alive in Lancaster County and Holmes County, and I'm pulling it out piece by piece. What I'm sharing next makes copper and zinc look like the opening chapter. This is a movement of people recovering what was taken from us, one forgotten technique at a time, and you're already part of it.